Hi, in this section of the tour I'd like to give you a brief introduction to Structure 101 architecture diagrams and how these allow you to define aspects of your system architecture, communicate these through the team so that everyone has a common vision, and perform automatic conformance monitoring or enforcement so that architectural decisions taken today will not be forgotten tomorrow. Okay, let me show you what they look like. Now you can create diagrams from scratch, but it's generally easier to create them from existing code. So let's do that now. And this basically gives us a bunch of cells, where each cell is mapped to an item in the codebase through patterns, and they're arranged in a vertical ordering to represent layers, with the default that a cell can depend on other cells lower down in the layering, but not to the side or up. Now there are a number of different ways that we can edit these diagrams depending on the semantics of what it is that we want to express. I'll just show you a couple of these very briefly for now. One would be that although Structure 101 suggested a layering when it created the diagram, I might decide as a human here that, you know what, actually Foundation does belong above widgets, so I could just drag and drop it up there. But note though that if I do this, then I get a violation. Now this is because the actual code does not conform to this layering. There is stuff in widgets that's using stuff in Foundation. So another example would be to use the expand capability on Foundation, for instance, to pull in another level of detail into the diagram. And now I'm going to mark the subsystem graph as private to the Foundation area. Now the moment I do this, I get a bunch of violations because there is indeed stuff outside Foundation that is using graph directly. And so I might use a diagram like this to force consumers to go through an API area rather than going direct to an implementation. Okay, so I can create lots of architecture diagrams, each telling their own little design story. Here's one I created earlier where I went to town a bit on the colors. And once I'm happy with these, I can choose to publish them to a central location. And this leads me over into the general area now of communication. Okay, so the first thing we have here now is a formal statement of design intent available for all to see via the Structure 101 web application. And the intent is expressed in a concise and intuitive graphical notation. Okay, for Java we have the added bonus that the diagrams can be embedded directly in the IDE via a plugin. This also supports conformance monitoring, either real-time or on demand. Let me just show you an example quickly. So when I uncomment this line of code that I prepared earlier and compile the changes, two things happen. First, I get a compiler error because this has been seen as a new violation, more on that in a moment. And second, I get a visual indicator as to the nature of the problem in the diagrams viewer bottom left. Here it's telling me that there is a dependency from util to assemblies which is contrary to the design intent. I can double-click on the violation arrow to get a structured list of all the class-level dependencies involved in the violation, and I can use this to navigate to the individual source files causing the problem. Let me just switch to a different source file first to illustrate. An important detail is that I can see that this particular violation is actually new. This means that it exists in my local version of the code, but did not exist in the reference snapshot saved in a central location. This is very useful from a pragmatics viewpoint, because it allows you to say, well, this is how the world should be. We know we have some problems in the codebase at the moment, but we don't have time to down tools and go back and fix everything. However, we do want to keep a lid on it. We're not going to let any new violations enter the codebase. And of course the same principle applies to the command line utilities. So I can plug a checker into my build and be absolutely sure that there are no new violations entering the codebase inadvertently. And that mention of inadvertently is the note I'd like to finish on, namely that architecture diagrams afford us a mechanism whereby we can say this is how we understand the design to be today, and any changes to that should be conscious rather than the result of accidental erosion over time.